Hello and welcome. Tonight, as Nigeria marks 26 years of unbroken democracy, President Bola Tinubu honors Kudirat Abiola, Shehu Musa Yar'Adua, Professor Wole Soyinka and other heroes of the nation's democracy as he addresses a joint session of the National Assembly. He also announces a pardon for Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogonis who were executed for murder in 1995. Moments after the president's speech, reactions poured in from lawmakers and other groups on the president's action. Covenant Christian Center holds a special edition of the platform to celebrate Nigeria's Democracy Day with speakers drawn from Nigeria and beyond. And at least 200 lives are lost when a London-bound India airplane crashes shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad. A British passenger, however, survived the crash.
On business news tonight, NNPC declares 5.8 trillion naira revenue and 748 billion naira profits in April as it eyes 4 major final investment decisions this year.
On sports news tonight, less than a month to the Women's African Cup of Nations, nighttime African champions, the Super Falcons of Nigeria, stay at the 36th spot and #1 in Africa in the latest FIFA ranking.
From the nation's capital, multiple rallies hold in the nation's capital and other cities with protesters calling on governments at all levels to address the challenges facing Nigerians.
We begin from the nation's capital, and it's been 26 years since Nigeria returned to democracy after years of military rule. In celebration of that feat, President Bola Tinubu today addressed a joint session of the National Assembly where he quashed speculation that Nigeria is heading towards a one-party state. While opening the doors to members of other political parties seeking to join the ruling All Progressives Congress, welcoming in particular new members from Delta and Akwa Ibom states, President Bola Tinubu quite bluntly advised other parties to address internal issues rather than project their fears. Our National Assembly correspondent Gloria Mizuki now reports.
Minutes before a historic national address by President Bola Tinubu at the National Assembly, former lawmakers, traditional leaders, governors, among others, began to fill in the over 300-capacity Green Chamber. President Tinubu arrived alongside Vice President Kashim Shettima and members of the cabinet. The leadership of the Senate kickstarts with their opening remarks.
The 10th National Assembly, which marks its 2nd anniversary today, June 13, which ought to be tomorrow, but we are marking it today, has played its part with diligence and distinction. A total of 844 bills have been introduced within its first 2 years, an unprecedented figure that underscores the Senate's and the House of Representatives' proactive posture towards tackling pressing national issues.
Our determination is unequivocal to expedite and finalize the constitutional amendment process by December 2025.
Rekindling memories while reflecting on his struggle for democracy, President Bola Tinubu in his address took a moment to straighten the records.
At no time in the past, nor any instance in the present, and at no future junction shall I view the notion of one-party state as good for Nigeria. Look at my political history. In year 2003, when the then governing party tried to sweep the nation clean of political opposition through plot and manipulation, I was the last progressive governor standing in my region. Call me any name. I'm not here to make you happy politically. And I will still call upon democracy to defend your right to do so. We cannot blame anybody seeking to bail out of a sinking ship, even without a life jacket. On your Monday we shall stand.
This drew a rousing chant from the audience, but the president wasn't done yet as he took a pointed swipe at the opposition.
I will not say try your best to put your house in order. I will not help you to do so either. It is indeed a pleasure to witness you in such a disarray. Our nation is not perfect, but it is strong. Our democracy is not invincible, but it is alive. And this means our dream of a prosperous, happy nation is still within reach and worth fighting for.
In a significant move on Nigeria's 26 years of democratic rule, President Tinubu conferred posthumous honors on prominent Nigerians, including Kudirat Abiola, environmental activist Ken Saro-Wiwa, and 8 other members of the Ogoni 9.
In this light, I announce the conferment of posthumous honors of CAFR on Kudirat Abiola, the heroine of our June 12 struggle. I also confer posthumous honor on Shehu Musa Yar'Adua, GCFR, and Professor Humphrey Nwosu, CON, Shibola Ige, CFR, Ruben Fasoranti, CFR, Bishop Mazi Azampuka, CON.
President Tinubu has not only been explicit in his rejection of a one-party future for the country, but concludes by acknowledging the formal adoption of June 12 as the official date for the President of Nigeria to deliver an address to a joint session of the National Assembly. From the National Assembly, Gloria Umezoke, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, lawmakers have been reacting to the President's Democracy Day speech at the National Assembly. While some commend the President's self-appraisal of the first 2 years of administration, others feared that so much work still needs to be done. Our National Assembly correspondent Terry Kumi spoke with the lawmakers at the end of the joint session of the National Assembly.
After a failed attempt to get the President to address Parliament exactly 1 year ago, the National Assembly has set a precedent, with the President addressing Parliament in what is hoped to become a Democracy Day tradition. The President in his address pledged to do all he can to safeguard the country's democracy. He debunked the allegations of his involvement in what many have called the push towards a one-party state, drawing reactions from members of Parliament across party lines.
What I find intriguing is the undemocratic actions of the President and his party and his government with respect to the undemocratic rule in Rivers State. I had expected that today presented the President a golden opportunity, today being Democracy Day in Nigeria, to restore democratic rule in Rivers State.
I don't think there's any one-party state in Nigeria. And he said something. Do you fight somebody who's helping a sinking ship? You want it sink to ship completely, but not rescue some people out of it?
He's not going to put the house of the opposition, he's not going to put the house in order for them. When you see a president who listens, this is the first time in the history of the country we were having a co-politician as the president.
This is one thing that Nigerians have been talking about on a daily basis. But I'm happy that the president has seized the opportunity of today to make proper clarification on this issue, that he is not advocating, he is not promoting one-party system.
The president also made it clear that the economic and social development of the country must not be compromised, pointing to positive results already trickling in, hinged on the policies of his administration.
Mr. President has said it all. You can see the kind of reforms that are going on And looking at what it is, even yesterday, I think the World Bank has projected that our growth will remain at 3.6%, and I believe that is to say that our reform is working.
One would have expected that we should have done more, especially in the areas of job creation, stimulating the economy to get in more foreign direct investment. I was reading a report recently which showed that in the last 6 years, we have had less foreign direct investment in Nigeria than we had in the previous 20 years of our democracy. Now, this should be worrying.
Some of the lawmakers and invited guests speak on the aspects of the president's address which caught their attention.
He recognized those who led the critical building blocks of our democracy, those who even paid the supreme price. Second, he also rolled out those of the advantages, the critical decisions he took to reform this country from the shackles of the past.
It's really very astonishing that they can remember all those great names, especially all the posthumous awards. I think it's really very presidential for him, and it shows the magnanimity of the person that we're talking about to truly really use the presidential instrument as a means of reconciliation.
One remarkable thing he has done is that he has said no, those who were opposed to Humphrey Nwosu being honored and recognized for his contributions for conducting that election. So he's honoring him today with a national honor of Commander of Order of the Niger is the way to build a nation.
To be fair to him, he has touched some areas that has to do with security, even though as the last part of his speech, emphasizing that they are doing everything possible to make sure that each and every inch of Nigerian territory is being reclaimed back from the terrorists and other armed groups.
While the arguments for and against the rubber stamp allegations against this 10th Assembly continue, the second half of this administration could be the deciding factor, depending on the impact of this relationship between the legislative and executive arms of government. From the National Assembly, Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
It appears that the movement for the survival of Ogoni people, MOSOP, is not on the same page in respect of the posthumous state pardon granted to the Ogoni 9 by President Bola Tinubu today. The group, led by Fegalon Suke, describes the posthumous state pardon granted the 9 Ogoni rights activists executed by the military regime of General Sani Abacha in 1995 during the Democracy Day address as a historic and courageous act of national reckoning and a vital step toward healing the deep wounds inflicted on the Ogoni people and the Nigerian conscience. The group, however, urges the president to go a step further by initiating a process of full exoneration of the Ogoni 9 by setting up a judicial commission of inquiry to investigate and formally repudiate the irregularities of the 1995 tribunal. On the other hand, the publicity secretary of MOSOP, Comrade Imiabe Xavier Oscar, says the declaration of pardon is not acceptable, noting that pardon does not arise because Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 others did not commit the crime leveled against them by the government. On the spot, the leader of the Ogoni Liberation Initiative, Dr. Fabeke Douglas, notes that the state pardon granted the late Saro-Wiwa and others did not meet the least expectation of the people of Ogoni and Niger Delta, demanding that the murdered Ogoni leaders be exonerated. In part 2, after the break, Covenant Christian Center holds a special edition of the platform to celebrate Nigeria's Democracy Day with speakers drawn from Nigeria and beyond. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you have just joined us, you're watching the News at 10 and Channels Television broadcasting live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. As Nigeria marks 26 years of unbroken democracy, President Bola Tinubu honors Kudirat Abiola, Shehu Musa Yar'Adua, Professor Wole Soyinka, and other heroes of the nation's democracy as he addresses a joint session of the National Assembly. He also announces a pardon for the late Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogonis who were executed for murder in 1995. Moments after the president's speech, reactions poured in from lawmakers and other groups on the president's action. Covenant Christian Center holds a special edition of the platform to celebrate Nigeria's Democracy Day with speakers drawn from Nigeria and beyond. And at least 200 lives are lost when a London-bound India airplane crashes shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad. A British passenger, however, survives the crash. Indeed, the historic significance of June the 12th, many believe, must not be lost on citizens, and President Bola Tinubu has urged Nigerians to take ownership of democracy in the country, assuring them of his administration's commitment to promoting its ideals. Vice President Kashim Shettima, who represented the president, made the call at a lecture organized to mark the 26th Democracy Anniversary celebration of Nigeria held in Abuja.
Thank you for being here.
Nigeria's Democracy Day celebration continues with a public lecture attended by Vice President Kashim Shettima and other eminent Nigerians at the State House Conference Center in Abuja. The thrust of the lecture is on consolidating the gains of Nigeria's democracy, focusing on the necessity of enduring reforms being championed by the administration of President Bola Tinubu.
At a period where many African countries are sliding back into military rule and dictatorship, Nigeria is powering forward in democratic rule. Even though we have not attained the democratic heights envisioned, we are confident that our path is straight and will lead us to a desired destination.
The lecture is delivered by a professor of political science who emphasized the need for commitment to sustain democracy in Nigeria.
This democracy has a major weakness because it's really not about democratic accountability to citizens. And that is why for a democracy of this type to work, you need a very strong civil society, you need citizens, and so on and so forth.
He also calls for a balance between economic reforms and national cohesion.
And for me, to go forward, what we need is paradigm change in terms of governance, in terms of our democratic politics, and in terms of statecraft. But also more importantly, we must address frontally the question of economic reform.
The event goes into a panel session with panelists interrogating issues of gender equity, leadership and governance, economic reforms and technological innovation in Nigeria. The need for synergy among the three tiers of government to deliver the dividends of democracy to the people is also emphasized.
There is also the matter of political will. No constitution, no matter how perfect, can enforce itself. No system, however well designed, can resist manipulation without principled actors. At critical moments, leaders must choose direction. Not every choice will be popular, but it must always be defensible in terms of public interest.
For Vice President Kashim Shettima, who represents President Tinubu at the event, the commitment of the current administration to promoting the ideals of democracy is not in doubt.
And to every Nigerian, North or South, Muslim or Christian, urban or rural, I say to you, this democracy belongs to you. Guard it, deepen it, own it. Let us go forward. Not as a divided people, but as one nation, bound in freedom, peace, and unity.
The highlight of the event is the unveiling of some books examining the gains of the administration of President Tinubu. Lanre Lasisi, Channels Television News.
As Nigeria marks its Democracy Day, the platform Nigeria Today hosted a special June the 12th edition at the Covenant Place in Igbomo, Lagos. This year's event spotlights the fundamental pillars of democracy, from freedom of speech to essential institutional reforms. The leaders of thought and policymakers delved into how Nigeria and the wider African continent can forge stronger and move forward-looking democratic systems.
Turn to somebody and say, Happy Democracy Day.
It's Democracy Day, and the platform Nigeria returns with its insightful special June 12th edition. Key voices from different branches of government and democratic institutions gather to share crucial insights on governance, education, and economic reforms vital for national development.
Pastor Poju Oyemade.
Setting the tone for the significant discourse, Pastor Poju Oyemade, the convener of the Platform Nigeria and the Platform Africa, and senior pastor of the Covenant Nation, highlights one of democracy's most important pillars, the fundamental freedom of speech.
In a democracy where power ideally is derived from the people, the freedom of speech and a right to associate ensure open discourse, allowing citizens to debate policies. Free speech allows for an exchange of ideas, and as ideas intersect and meet and interact, through that, the best ideas emerge.
Following the distinguished speaker, Dr. Amina Gurib Fakim, the 6th president and first female president of the Republic of Mauritius, delivers a powerful address emphasizing that education stands as Africa's greatest need. She passionately described it as a surest path out of poverty and a lasting solution to the continent's persistent brain drain.
At the highest level of the education spectrum, we must ensure that our most talented students can enjoy a world-class higher education without being forced to seek for it overseas. Too many of these young scholars understandably stay after obtaining advanced degrees to make their careers and homes in their adopted country. This is their loss. This is Nigeria's loss. This is Africa's loss. The only way to reverse the brain drain is to provide comparable professional and personal opportunities for our most talented sons and daughters at home here in Africa.
Thank you so much. Please sit down.
The conversation then shifts to a core critical issue for Nigeria's democratic process, the imperative of strengthening democratic institutions and implementing necessary reforms.
They have inadequate funding.
In his insightful presentation, former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Tahiru Jega, meticulously outlined key democratic institutions that demand reinforcement while spotlighting the critical challenges that they currently face.
We need to proscribe cross-carpeting, particularly for elected executives and the legislators. And we need to empower the Electoral Commission at the federal level and the CS at the state level to prepare for and conduct by-elections as soon as they have evidence about elected people cross-carpeting. It should be made mandatory that all elections disputes are resolved before swearing in of elected executives.
Since Nigeria's return to democracy in 1999, May 29th was observed as Democracy Day. But in 2018, June 12 was officially declared the new Democracy Day to honor the historic 1993 election, believed to have been won by Moshood Abiola.
Now adding their voices to insightful conversations at the June 12th special edition of the Platform Nigeria, our former Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola, and Governor of Anambra State, Professor Chukwuma Soludo. The summit, which comes at a symbolic moment where millions of Nigerians are marking 26 years of democracy, featured key discussions on the rule of law, nation rebuilding, and economic development.
In a bid to chart a new course for national development, the Platform Nigeria once again opened its doors to key players and experts to dissect pressing issues in the country.
Please join me as we welcome back to the Platform Nigeria
Former Minister of Power, Works and Housing, who also was the former Governor of Lagos State, Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, takes aim at the role of law and its crucial stance in shaping the nation.
If the rule of law had prevailed, there would have been no crisis on June 12th. MKO would have been president. No one is above the law. All of us are equal, or we have to be treated equally. Even government is not above the law. That's what it means. But the rule of law is not some fancy concept. It's not a legislative thing or a lawyer thing. It is about lives, it's about livelihoods, and it's about the quality of life. So it's a great determinant whether a country or a state or a local government is safe or unsafe. And that will determine whether it is a place to start a family, that will determine whether it is a place to work, or whether it's a place to start a business.
Meanwhile, Governor of Anambra State and former Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Professor Chukwuma Soludo, highlights strategies to rebuilding a nation economically.
And more often we focus on the leadership. For sure, there is a lot that is wrong with our leadership, but leadership often reflects the larger society, its values, ethics, culture, beliefs, and expectations. Leaders are products of the society, and you can't give what you don't have. As pilgrims here on earth, there is no time to waste. Complaints or protest is good, but better to do something constructive about the subject of complaint. So a fundamental step towards a sustainable Nigerian nation is for all apostles of progressive change to unite around a consolidated agenda for sustainable national rebirth. When progressives come together, let's give Nigerians a progressive agenda that everybody can relate with and that everybody can be held accountable to.
The rule of law, a major foundation in democracy, shapes the building and rebuilding of a nation. And at this special edition of the platform, there is an understanding that every member of society, as well as the government, has a major role to play, because it is from these collective efforts that a nation thrives successfully.
A well-deserved round of applause.
Still ahead on the news at 10, NNPCL declares 5.89 trillion naira revenue and 748 billion naira profits in April as it eyes 4 major investment decisions this year. That's on Business News. Please join us again. Let's now head to the nation's capital, and Millicent Walker is standing by to give us the latest from our Abuja studios. Happy Democracy Day, Millicent. Over to you.
I wish you the same. Many thanks, Ayatunde. Now, as Nigeria marks Democracy Day, June 12, a date symbolic in the nation's history, multiple solidarity rallies held across the Federal Capital Territory in support of President Tinubu. The solidarity rallies were led by leaders of student associations, Forum of Special Advisors, and the Minister of Youth Development. Meanwhile, the Take It Back movement also staged a protest in Plateau State, calling on the federal and state government to immediately address insecurity in the state.
From the Old Parade Ground in Abuja to the Eagle Square, the city center, groups of young people in their numbers gather for solidarity rallies for President Bola Tinubu as Nigeria marks June 12, also known as Democracy Day. June 12, 1993 is a symbolic date in Nigeria's democratic history, as it is a day the government recognized that Moshood Abiola was democratically elected as president, though the election was annulled by the then military president. As these young people mark the day in Abuja, many of them reflect on how the incumbent administration has included young people in decision-making processes.
Mr. President, you have made the youth your co-pilots in this audacious flight of national redemption. We are not paraded as tokens any longer, but we are partners in policy, innovation, and execution of the task for the birth of a new Nigeria.
Today, no president has ever done what Mr. President has done today in terms of youth inclusion in his government. If you look at it today, you will see that more than 60% of his appointees are youth.
The groups also applaud President Tinubu's education policies in the last 2 years.
This is the first time in the history of democracy that no student go out because he's not able to pay school fees because of the student loan. And it's not only because of the student loan, because of the token also given to them outside the loan.
It is worthy to note that since the inception of democracy, it is the president that has invested much in education. As the senior special assistant to the president, being the bridge between the government and the student, the office will always be open for you, for your yearnings, and for all your demands for the president to always making sure that those things that you request is being done.
However, the Take It Back movement staged a protest in front of the Plateau State Assembly in Jos, calling on President Tinubu and the state governor to immediately address the problem of insecurity in the state.
We make the following demands. One, to the federal government: deploy intelligence-driven security operations immediately to the most vulnerable LGAs on the plateau. Investigate in rebuilding sacked villages and restoring livelihoods to prevent future violence. Initiate independent and transparent investigation led by the National Human Rights Commission into all incidents of mass killings and village displacement.
Although the solidarity rallies in Abuja were peaceful, there was heavy deployment of security operatives in strategic locations, with no dissenting rally within the city center.
Well, more on the June 12 rallies, and in Lagos, some youth groups took to major streets to embark on peaceful protests in designated areas across the state, highlighting frustrations over corruption, insecurity and economic hardship. They call for greater accountability and an end to what they refer to as bad governance.
The Lekki tollgate, one of the converging points for the June 12 Democracy Day nationwide protests, is notably quiet with unhindered vehicular movement. No signs of protests, gatherings, or any activities indicating an imminent demonstration. Despite the peaceful atmosphere, security is not taken for granted, as men of the Nigeria police and other security outfits adequately man strategic areas. Elsewhere at the Gani Foemi Park in Ojota, members of the Take It Back movement stage a peaceful demonstration under the watchful eyes of security personnel. Their voices convey deep concerns over the state of insecurity across the country, citing a spike in killings and abductions, particularly in northern Nigeria. The group also demands the reversal of fuel subsidy removal, a reduction in electricity tariff, and greater investment in the education sector.
We are insisting that the government must reverse all increments that have been placed on the electricity tariff. As a matter of fact, due to some of these policies like subsidy removal that are hiking cost of fuel, hiking electricity tariff, it is killing small businesses. Small businesses are closing down. Even some medium businesses are shutting down.
The Ikeja Underbridge Convergence Point witnessed a large turnout of a second group, members of the End Bad Governance movement.
Any government policy that does not positively affect the life of the citizen is a bad policy. There are no two ways about it. So all the paperwork should translate into making life meaningful for the ordinary Nigerian. So that is exactly where the point should be made. And that is why we are out to let the federal government know that the masses are hungry. Maybe the people close to the president are not telling him the truth.
And directly opposite them is a third group, dressed in green and white T-shirts, inscribed Team Nigeria for Change, holding what they call a celebration of June 12.
Up till last regime, 24 states were owing salaries at the time. Not one state in Nigeria today is owing salaries. It will keep getting better. I'm not saying we're where we're supposed to be, but it keeps getting better.
While these demonstrations continue, security personnel remain alert.
What we agreed in the meeting preceding the protest and the celebration is for them to assemble here and to move simultaneously to the Gani Fire Park in Ojota. So I don't think there's any dispute about that.
As Lagos State leads the charge, the message from the three groups is clear. Nigerians are no longer willing to accept bad governance. They demand action, accountability, and a future where democracy truly works for everyone.
Well, as Nigeria marks 26 years of uninterrupted democracy, former Ekiti State Governor Kayode Fayemi has called for the recognition of key players in the struggle for democracy who were overlooked by President Bola Tinubu during his recent honors for prominent individuals associated with the June 12 movement. Speaking on Channels Television's special program for Democracy Day, Dr. Fayemi commended President Tinubu's initiative to honor prominent figures, but expressed his expectations that those left out should also receive the recognition they deserve.
I wasn't particularly happy, and I must say this upfront, that those who were the drivers of that project, yes, I led that project, but none of them was recognized today by the president. Late Mr. Yinka Johnson, who coordinated that effort as our technical director, Bola Olalemi, late Daniel Johnson, George Noah, Shola Adeyeye, the senator, was a fiery voice on that Radio Kudirat. Dr. Tajuddin Abdurrahim, Philip Ilebereme, so many of the guys who were really involved. Yes, I was the face of Radio Kudirat in the sense that I was responsible for its management. But there were so many voices, so many people who risked their lives. But they were not the only ones not mentioned today. However, one must not undervalue what the president did today. Be established somewhere in Abuja.
Well, Jamiu Abiola, son of the late Chief MKO Abiola, reflected on the profound impact the struggle for the actualization of June 12 had on his family. He shared the personal tragedy of losing both his parents to the struggle, leaving him and his siblings to navigate life without parental guidance.
Country, and like the younger ones, the two of them were taken out of the country, so we were more or less on our own, at the end of the day. I mean, of course, my mother has a wonderful family, she has sisters and all that, but it's not the same, once you lose your parents, you're on your own, because everybody has their own family, you can't be a nuisance, you can't be a liability to anyone, so we had to grow up very, very fast, and once you lose your childhood, you lose it forever. So these are things that can never change. But we, at this point, we are not going to start crying over spilled milk and thinking about what has happened in the past. The good thing about it is that we've moved on. None of us have run mad. None of us are crazy. But it was the most terrible thing. I would not wish my enemy to even have that kind of experience, because there were only 7 of us. And the eldest was Leko. And at that point, when my mother was killed, he was just like 22 years old. So at that point, it's like we were carrying the whole country on our head. And, it was very unfortunate.
And that's it from the nation's capitals. Over now to Dominic Iwiru in Lagos for business news.
Thank you, Millicent. On business news, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, says it's recorded 5.891 trillion naira as revenue and 748 billion naira as net tax profits in April of this year. According to its monthly report for the period released today, the state oil firm says it also made statutory payments of 4.225 trillion naira between January and March this year. The report also shows that the NNPCL recorded 1.61 million barrels per day in crude oil and condensate production, 7.35 million standard cubic feet daily in natural gas production, while the upstream pipe availability stood at 97% in April. The state oil company says it expects to conclude 4 critical final investment decisions before the end of this year. Conversations on strengthening Sino-Africa economic ties continue today in Changsha, in China, as business leaders, policymakers, and private sector delegates gathered for the China-Africa Private Sector Cooperation Forum 2025. The high-level discussions focused on trade, infrastructure, and digital innovation, key drivers of the growing partnership between the world's second-largest economy and the African continent. Our business correspondent, Ladi Williams, reports from the event.
China-Africa collaboration is on the front burner in Changsha, China, as private sector players in China and Africa meet to strengthen trade ties. And data shows that China-Africa trade volume has grown from about $10 billion in the year 2000 to around $295 billion, positioning China as Africa's largest trading partner. Dr. Eric Ruto, president of Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, highlights what investors in Kenya are also exploring.
And to actively and practically participate. And I'll tell you that Kenyan investors and traders are currently increasing intra-African trade.
The Nigerian delegation from the Nigeria-China Strategic Partnership highlights efforts to diversify Nigeria's economy.
Nigeria was previously defined by monolithic products, oil and gas. But today, I'm happy to tell you that 90% of our production is no longer oil and gas. We've diversified into digital economy. We've gone into manufacturing. We are very much present in agriculture, and we have a lot to do on the African continent when you look at financial technology, fintech.
So China and Africa are stepping up the relationship as country and continent continue to push for more collaboration. And today conversations began at the China-Africa Private Sector Cooperation Forum. And we see Changsha, China as the place to be right now with an estimated population of over 5 million people. This event is designed to boost trade relations, facilitate partnerships between Chinese and African businesses with trade, infrastructure, and investment. So today we had pitches from a couple of African countries, and definitely at the end of the day is to create that synergy between a continent as Africa and a giant as China. Ladi Williams reporting for Channels Television News in Changsha, China.
And that's it on Business News. Back to Ayotunde for the rest of the news at 10.
Thank you, Dominic. A London-bound Air India plane carrying 242 people crashed in a residential area in Ahmedabad shortly after takeoff earlier today. Air India says 241 people on board the aircraft were killed, but one passenger, a British national, survived and is now receiving treatment in hospital. Here's Simon Pusey with more on this and other international news and around the world in 5 from our London studio.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. An Air India passenger plane bound for London Gatwick Airport has crashed shortly after taking off from Ahmedabad. Here, footage showing the huge fireball as the plane went down. The flight was carrying 242 passengers and crew when it was involved in what the airline has called a tragic accident in the city in western India. Pictures from the scene soon after shows the charred wreckage. Ahmedabad's police chief says and that some local people would have also died given where the plane went down. Among the passengers were 169 Indian nationals, 53 British nationals, 1 Canadian and 7 Portuguese. The aircraft involved was a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner, and the Air India crash is the first time it has come down in such a way.
It's got a really good safety record. Having seen the footage, and it's very tragic and it's quite distressing to see it, but there is viral footage of the crash itself. The weather conditions looked to be perfect, to be fine. The aircraft itself was, although it was descending rapidly, obviously, it was actually straight and level, which is kind of unusual because it was descending in a way that if it had been high altitude, it's hard to gauge from that whether the crew were still in control up until the last moment or not.
The global nuclear watchdog has found Iran has failed to meet its non-proliferation obligations for the first time in 20 years. A resolution passed by the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency carries the threat of an eventual referral to the UN Security Council. It follows a report from the IAEA last week, which cited a general lack of cooperation from Iran and raised concerns over secret activities and undeclared nuclear material in areas which have long been under investigation. The bodies of 1,212 Ukrainian soldiers have been returned from Russia, according to Kyiv, as part of a prisoner exchange agreement between the countries. In return, Russia has received 27 bodies, Moscow's chief negotiator said. The prisoner exchange deal was the only tangible result of peace talks in Turkey last week, with both sides agreeing to hand over as many as 6,000 bodies each, as well as sick and heavily wounded prisoners of war. Footage shared online shows hundreds of Palestinians climbing over a large mound of dirt, with some scaling a metal fence as they rush to enter an aid site in Gaza run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. People are then seen entering the site and running towards what is assumed to be aid. The UN and other aid groups refuse to cooperate with the new system, saying it contravenes the humanitarian principles of neutrality, impartiality, and independence. Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty of sexual assault in New York after his sex crimes conviction in the state was overturned last year. A panel of 7 female and 5 male jurors deliberated for 5 days in the 6-week trial before unanimously voting to convict the disgraced film mogul on 1 of 3 counts. The jury found him not guilty of an additional sexual assault charge and has yet to return a verdict on a charge of rape. The conviction is in addition to a 16-year sentence that Weinstein has yet to serve after being convicted of sex crimes in Los Angeles. And Brian Wilson, the legendary frontman and co-founder of the Beach Boys, has died at the age of 82. Born in 1942 and raised in California, Wilson formed a group with his younger brothers Carl and Dennis, cousin Mike Love, and friend Al Jardine. The Beach Boys went on to become one of the country's biggest rock bands, selling more than 100 million records globally. Bob Dylan said he had spent years admiring Wilson's genius, while Sir Elton John described him as a true giant who had the biggest influence on his songwriting. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel's studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome to Sports News. Nighttime African champions, the Super Falcons of Nigeria, maintain their sport as the best playing nation on the continent and 36th position in the world in the latest FIFA Women's World Ranking released earlier today. They are closely trailed by South Africa in the 54th position, Morocco at 3rd in the 60th position, Cameroon moved 2 places to 64th position, and Zambia completes the top 5 in Africa. The United States ladies are the top playing nations in the world. Spain and Germany, Brazil, England, Sweden, Japan, Canada, Korea, and France complete the world's top 10 best playing nation. The mayor of Mexico City pledges a World Cup in 2026 without racism or discrimination as she launches a countdown to the opening match 1 year to the day in the presence of former Italian star Del Piero. Clara Brugada believes Mexico City and its 9.2 million inhabitants will experience a World Cup without racism, classism, discrimination, xenophobia, and homophobia. With 13 matches and 3 venues out of 16, Mexico, first time, only co-host with the USA, which will host the largest number of matches, and Canada. That Sports is back to you, Ayo.
Many thanks, Chris. And the main news again. As Nigeria marks 26 years of unbroken democracy today, President Bola Tinubu used the occasion to honor Kudirat Abiola, Shehu Musa Yaradua, Professor Wole Soyinka, and other heroes of the nation's democracy. The president made the declaration when he addressed a joint session of the National Assembly. He also announced a pardon for Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogonis who were executed for murder back in 1995. That's the news at 10 tonight. Many thanks for watching. I'm Ayo Tunde Balogun. Have a good night.